Every air disaster is different, but at the root of each can be found one or more causes from a grimly familiar list. Terrorism, mechanical malfunction, weather, technical trouble, human error. Very rarely does a plane wreck result from a combination of all these recurring factors. But that is exactly what happened on the Canary Islands in 1977, when a perfect storm of catastrophe touched down on the Tenerife runway.
What we're looking at is Charlie 4. As you see Charlie 4 where it joins the active runway is where the accident occurred.
Co-pilot Robert Bragg is the only surviving officer from the historic crash.
I think it changes you when you see that much devastation and that many people so badly hurt. I think the things that probably you didn't consider important in life before the accident becomes much more important.
On March 27, 1977, two jumbo 747 jets collide, approaching the C4 taxiway at Tenerife. The catastrophe claims 583 lives, the greatest death toll from a single aviation incident to date. No one aboard KLM Flight 4805 survives, and only 70 people on Pan Am Flight 1736 escaped the inferno that engulfed both planes. The events in Tenerife resulted from an almost inconceivable chain of bad luck and worse circumstance. Terrorism shuts down one airport, rerouting huge airliners to another airport with only a single runway to handle the new traffic. Key radio transmissions cancel each other out, and warnings given
1736, report when runway clear,
are never heard. Weather shrouds the airport in fog, and huge planes are forced to maneuver out of sight from one another. A cascading series of human errors provide the final accelerant. Exactly what happened here on this runway in 1977? How did it happen? And more importantly, can it happen again?
1448, you shouldn't be anywhere near Kilo. Hold your position, please. Just stop.
I think anyone who's been through an accident automatically asks themselves what they could have done possibly to have prevented the accident.
There were 6 men in the cockpits of both 747s. 3 died that afternoon. Today, only 1 pilot remains. Now, Captain Robert Bragg has agreed to go back into the cockpit to recreate, with a simulated crew, the exact unfolding chain of events leading to the deadly collision. The dialogue we are about to hear comes directly from the transcripts of the tapes recorded that day. When, in the space of an hour, miscommunication,
taxiway to your left,
impatience,
35 minutes,
poor visibility, and technical malfunction culminated in the most deadly aviation catastrophe in history. A disaster that could happen again.
Terminal building. You are to proceed to alternate Tenerife.
Heeding the tower command, Captain Bragg and his crew now redirect their jumbo jet to Tenerife's Los Rodeos airport, about 25 minutes away on the island of Santa Cruz de Tenerife.
And we contacted the tower, and they immediately said,
you are clear to land, runway 30 in Tenerife.
the weather was perfectly clear. We could see the airport from about 15 miles out. We saw probably 50 airplanes that had been diverted there, because this is around 3 in the afternoon on Sunday afternoon. So the whole ramp area was completely congested.
Clipper 1736, taxi and exit at the end of the runway and hold a position behind the KLM ahead of you.
Our parking area was the fourth position in a line of 4 airplanes. So there were 3 other airplanes in front of us, including KLM, which was directly in front of us.
Likewise, aboard the KLM flight, cockpit crew and passengers hunker down for a wait. Perhaps they take comfort in the career achievements of their pilot, who is featured in their complimentary issue of KLM's In-Flight magazine.
And finally, we heard the tower operator say,
Gentlemen, be advised that Las Palmas is now open.
About 3:45, news of this announcement from the tower comes as a relief to everyone. Planes have been grounded for almost 2 hours. But the wait isn't over yet. Now KLM Captain Jacob van Janten makes an unusual decision to refuel. His action is unnecessary. Records later show that the plane had sufficient reserves. The Pan Am crew was surprised and annoyed by the delay.
The Captain Vic Grubbs called KLM and asked him, KLM 4805, how long will you take to refuel? And the KLM pilot responded very abruptly.
35 minutes.
In the 35 minutes it will take for the KLM to refuel, yet another adverse condition descends upon the runway at Tenerife.
A fog bank comes down off the side of this hill and stops right on the runway.
And that fog is to become a funeral shroud for 583 men, women, and children. After an almost 3-hour ground delay, the tower finally clears all flights for departure to their original destinations.
Gentlemen, be advised that Las Palmas is now open.
Unfortunately, the KLM pilot's decision to refuel will result in an additional 35-minute delay for his flight and all those behind him, including the Pan Am Jumbo. Finally, at 4:58 p.m., after filling the KLM's tank with an additional 14,500 gallons of fuel, co-pilot Klaus Mears contacts the Tenerife Tower for permission to taxi for takeoff.
We require a backtrack on 12 for takeoff, runway 30.
Okay, KLM A0, correction, 4805, taxi straight ahead for the runway and make back track.
Roger, make a backtrack.
Because Tenerife's airport is small, departing planes must backtrack to lift off. That means taxiing down the runway to the end, then turning around to take off in the same direction they originally came from.
There was a DC-9 in the number 1 position. There was a DC-8 in the 2nd position, or the number 2 position. Then KLM was in the number 3 position. We were in the number 4 position. They gave the clearances, taxi clearance, to the first 2 airplanes, and it was thus that they were to taxi and backtrack down the runway. In other words, they taxied down the runway in the opposite direction of where they're going to be taking off. When you get to the last taxiway on your left, exit the runway and position back.
At 4:59 p.m., KLM Flight 4805 begins to taxi down the runway.
Approach. You want us to turn left at Charlie 1? Taxi evade Charlie 1?
Negative. Taxi straight ahead up to the end of the runway and make back track.
Okay, sir.
A few minutes later at 5:02, Pan Am is instructed to follow KLM's taxi down the runway. But unlike KLM, the Pan Am flight is to turn off at one of the several taxi exits and wait. This in order to clear the runway for KLM to lift off. It's with these instructions that confusion starts to arise. It is unclear to the pilots of the Pan Am flight exactly which taxi exit traffic control intends for them to take.
We got the instructions from the tower.
Pan Am 1736, take third taxiway to your left.
We had just passed C2. If, as some people have contended, we were supposed to take Charlie 3, that taxiway takes you right back into the terminal area. All of the taxiways on that terminal were blocked, so we'd have not been anywhere. We'd have had to just wait there again.
Feeling that the Charlie 3 taxiway must not be their intended destination, The Pan Am crew calls the tower again for clarification.
The third one said 1, 2, 3, the third one.
Since their jet has already passed the first exit, in telling them to take the third exit, the crew believes the tower intends for them to exit at C4, the third exit from C1.
The other airplane had done the very same thing. It was the logical taxiway to get off the runway on. So we all felt very confident that that was the taxiway that we were supposed to depart the runway on.
And then, just when things are teetering dangerously out of control, fate strikes. A thick fog suddenly descends on the airfield.
The island has a reputation of very quickly fogging in. And the visibility went from unlimited down to 500 meters, which is about 1,500 feet. And we could just barely see the runway in front of the nose. And at the same time, looking for our taxiway that we were supposed to turn off to the left to clear the active runway and to get off the runway and into position back at the KLM.
Like many small single runway airports, Tenerife was not equipped with ground radar, allowing air traffic controllers to monitor aircraft on the field. But even as the airfield is enveloped by fog, the decision to go ahead with takeoff remains in place.
That particular runway, as most runways are, were very highly painted to give you the center line, and we were barely able to see the runway. And the captain had slowed the airplane down to like 3 knots, just barely moving. We were just beginning to see the curved directional lines to take us off on the Charlie 4, which was the taxiway we were looking for.
Having lost sight of the KLM and the Pan Am jets, the tower now seeks to get verbal confirmation on the relative location of both planes on the runway.
KLM 4805, how many taxiway did you pass?
I think we just passed Charlie 4 now.
Both cockpit crews and the air traffic controllers are now working outside of their comfort zones.
Okay, at the end of the runway, make 180 and report. Ready for ATC clearance.
The KLM reaches the end of the runway and turns 180 degrees. What happens next is an extraordinary exchange between pilot and co-pilot. This is the KLM cockpit conversation taken from the transcripts. Wait a minute. We did not have ATC clearance yet. No, I know that. Go ahead and ask. This exchange suggests that Van Janten had begun to take off until his co-pilot reminds him that he did not have clearance. This is an unusual interaction as Van Janten, the senior officer, was not used to having his judgment questioned in his own cockpit.
Democracy in the cockpit is a very cultural issue. There are some cultures that they are basically very high in power distance, meaning that there is a very strong hierarchy and very steep hierarchy in their society. We cannot expect they have a democracy in the cockpit.
Van Janten waits impatiently for further instructions from ground control.
The KLM 4805 is now ready for takeoff. And we're waiting for our ATC clearance.
It's a routing clearance that air traffic control gives the departing plane that basically tells him how to go from one airport, your departure point, to your destination.
Report, ready for ATC clearance.
But even ATC, or air traffic control clearance, is only a confirmation of the in-flight route to be taken. Clearance to actually take off must be given separately. It is these next few moments of communication between the tower and the two planes that will forever be analyzed.
Roger, sir. We are cleared to the Papa Beacon flight level 90.
We heard the KLM pilot read the clearance pack, which is required. As soon as he finished reading the ATC clearance back, he added a comment that was totally unexpected to us.
And we're now at takeoff.
Okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you.
But we were still taxiing down, assuming that KLM was going to be holding his position as he was directed to do. And that's when I got on the radio and said, but we're still on the runway.
1736, report when runway clear.
Von Janten again begins the takeoff. If there were any further objections in his cockpit, the transcripts do not reveal them. The huge, fully fueled jumbo jet begins to pick up speed. The point of no return has now been passed.
When we first saw the KLM airplane, it wasn't of great concern because we knew he was down there. Then I noticed his landing lights were on, and I saw his lights shaking. And then that's when I said, I think he's moving.
Är synd att you're off done. Är synd att you're off, det Pan American. Javäl.
I could see his rotating beacon, and he lifted off.
Now, do something, pull faster, pull back.
I just could not believe that this airplane was taking off coming right at us.
On a fog-bound runway, two 747 jumbo jets desperately attempt to escape each other's path, but it's too late.
And I said, he's moving, get off, to the captain. He went to full power on the throttles. We were only going 3 knots, so the airplane was moving very slowly. I think I must have said a very short prayer. I hope he misses us. And that's when I just closed my eyes and ducked.
Root causes for the catastrophe at Tenerife are manifold. The University of Southern California School of Engineering is home to an internationally famous aviation safety research and training program. Dr. Najmuddin Mashkati focuses on human error factors.
When you look at the contributing factors of Tenerife, which we were able to identify like 9 or 10 human factors, related contributing factors. At the end of the day, in its core, is a human factors problem.
I know
The
that.
culture inside the KLM cockpit would prove to be the most closely analyzed set of human errors attributed to the crash.
One of the biggest problems that was raised in the case of KLM at the Tenerife was that Captain Van Zanten, because of his personality, he was like a chief pilot, the poster boy pilot for the KLM, and that it was very hard to disagree with him. Cultural factors can play a tremendous role within the cockpit, between the pilot and co-pilot, and between the cockpit and air traffic controller. Their interaction. As you see that you are really at the mercy of cultural factors.
Är synd att you're off, det Pan American. Javäl.
And as it turned out, it was actually the flight engineer, this is the third in command on the flight deck, who actually questioned whether the Pan American airplane was off the runway. He was the only one who did. And the captain responded that yes, he was emphatically, that he was off the runway.
While the consequences of human dynamics at Tenerife will long be debated, other failures are more cut and dry. One critical but little discussed root cause has been attributed to a common technical glitch in radio communications.
Okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you.
I responded by keying the mic and saying, we are still on the runway.
Roger Alpha, 1736, report when runway clear.
Tragically, Robert Bragg's urgent message that his 747 is still on the runway and in the direct path of the KLM 747 is never clearly received. He goes unheard because of a radio frequency phenomenon known as the heterodyne effect. Patrick Smith is a commercial airline pilot and author.
Most of the time, pilots communicate via a two-way VHF radio. And the way that works is a crew member or an air traffic controller picks up a microphone or using the headset and the hand switch on the yoke, clicks the mic, makes the transmission, releases the mic, and waits for an acknowledgement or, in pilot speak, a read back.
3 Golf Charlie's ready at Foxtrot 25 left.
3 Golf Charlie, runway 25 left, position hold.
Position hold 25 left, 3 Golf Charlie.
The trouble arises when two or more transmissions are made at the same time. They effectively cancel each other out, and the result is a prolonged squeal or just a hail of static. What happened at Tenerife is that two very critical transmissions that effectively could have prevented the accident were made at the same instant, were blocked out, and nobody caught it. There are units that can be put into airline transport radios that won't allow heterodynes to occur. And for the most part, they haven't been installed. And that's not to say that there's a crisis at hand where there are, airplanes waiting to crash into each other all the time. It's been 30 years and it hasn't happened. And with 40,000 or so airplanes taking off, commercial airplanes taking off around the world every day, the record speaks for itself. That said, it's an easy fix. Why not do it?
The catastrophe that happened at Tenerife has a technical name: incursion. The Federal Aviation Administration defines a runway incursion as a collision or a near miss involving two planes either trying to land or take off. The Tenerife incursion might be the worst in history, but it will not be the last.
From the last report I heard, there's still something like 300 runway incursions that occur every year throughout the world. In my case, I had never had a runway incursion until the Tenerife accident.
But one was enough, and another will be one too many.